Hello everyone, welcome back to Naomi's Bookshelf. Today we're going to do my mid-month wrap-up. So today we are talking about the 14 books that I've read in the first half of the month. I managed to read quite a lot of books, and honestly, a lot of them are really short, and I have enjoyed my reading of them. Some of them were really interesting, and some of them were okay, but for the most part, I did really enjoy them. So let's get into the books that I read so far. So the first book on my stack was this great Quicksolve Whodunnit puzzles. I remember reading this one before because I remembered some of the results and some of the ways to solve the puzzles. In particular one I definitely remembered. So it was like, I knew I had read this one before. I gave this one a 3-star because some of these definitely have to know information to solve the clues or solve the riddles, essentially. So it's like you have to know certain information. I remember one, you have to know football hand signals to know the end result. And so it was like, if you don't know football results or football hand gestures, you don't know how to solve that one. So in some ways, these are really hard to solve, and in other ways, you can just kind of figure it out. But I did enjoy reading these, and they're pretty fast. It's under 100 pages, and I gave it 3 stars. The first book that I actually picked up in the year, and I read it over 7 days, was Nemesis by Jo Nesbo. I read this one with Nikki and Berna. I will link their channels down below. I thoroughly enjoyed reading this one. I gave it 4 stars. It's not my favorite in the series. This is book 4 in the Harry Hole series, and I really enjoyed reading this one. This one follows Harry as he is now working with a new colleague to try and solve bank robberies. It's an interesting case where the bank robber has the hostage speak for him, essentially, in the robbery situation, and he is trying to solve this with a new colleague. And then on top of that, he is meeting up with an old flame. Also, the relationships he's had in the previous books are there in this current book. I really enjoyed many elements of this. I should have seen what was going on in this, but I didn't, so good on Jo Nesbo for tricking me. I really did enjoy how this all wrapped up. I definitely enjoyed this one a lot. Better than the first book in the series, but obviously first books don't always get the best writing because it's the first book. However, not my favorite in the series so far. This is the 4th book though, and I'm excited to keep going on. I have read The Snowman, which I think is book 7. So we're getting up to the first book I ever read in this series. And I'm excited to get to that point again and read that one for the 2nd time. Another book that I read was The Daughter of Time by Josphine. I did read this one out of my author's jar, and I thoroughly loved it. This one was a really weird reading experience for me because this one felt like Josphine was defending Richard III, and I looked up some of the information while reading the book, and it was like all of the information was accurate to what this was saying. So let me first of all say what this is about in case you don't know. In this book, Detective Alan Grant is laid up with a broken leg, and he is stuck because he cannot do any investigating of any kind. And so he starts to investigate Richard III if he actually killed his nephews. You know, the 2 princes in the tower, the infamous case. And as this case is being investigated by Alan Grant, along with another man who is helping him from the British Museum. It was really interesting to see all of these clues come together. And I'm a big history nerd. I'm a lover of history, and I'm a lover of, you know, Tudor England and also like that era of England as well. So it was really interesting. I loved the Henrietta of Shakespeare. So it was really fascinating to learn about this. And I read this book more like a history book, like a nonfiction. So that was fascinating for me. And I felt like, as I was reading this, that Josphine was defending Richard III. And I was just gobsmacked, essentially, how it felt so strange. So this book felt like a nonfiction, or it felt like Josphine defending Richard III through Alan Grant defending or researching Richard III. It was like Inception through a book. But I loved it. 5 stars, fantastic. I walked away, it was like, this is fantastic. I looked up articles and it was like, this is actually Josphine research. She wanted to put this in a book, and she did. I thoroughly believed everything that was in this book. she tricked me, or not tricked me, she convinced me that this was accurate and that her information was solid. I really did find this information to be quite convincing, and I believe that Richard III did not kill his nephews after this. I also have always believed that Shakespeare was quite biased when he wrote his plays, so you can't always believe everything you hear about that from Shakespeare. So yes, Josephine Tay is now a new author I am going to be buying a lot of books from, or not from, but by. So thoroughly love The Daughter of Time, and I'm so glad I got it out of the jar and read it this month. And I basically read it in one sitting. It was just so good. Another book that I read this month was The Midnight Library by Matt Haig. I was not sure if I was wanting to read this one, but I had to read for my book club, and we discussed it on the 12th. So I had to finish it this month early. I started this before Christmas, and I think I read the first like sentence or two, which was like, whatever it was, 23 hours before she wanted to die. I don't remember exactly. Let me just find that sentence. So it says 19 hours before she wanted to die, Nora Seed sat in the warmth of the library. And I was like, I don't want to read this before Christmas. 19 hours before she wants to die? That sounds depressing. So I put it down and I decided to read it in January, break for book club. And I'm really happy that I actually pushed through and read it all. I gave it 4 stars. I thought it was a very interesting premise. This one is about Nora. So obviously this is a precursor trigger for suicide or suicidal thoughts. This book follows Nora, who wants to die, and she, as she decides to commit suicide, is sent to a place where it has many, many books. And this place is full of, let me see if I can do this without spoiling. Okay, so the summary basically was saying what I was going to say. So she's sent to this library full of books that are all of the regrets that she's ever had in her life, and she has a chance to look in, and that's where the infinite possibilities are. It's a very interesting premise, and I had a really great time discussing with my book club. I really enjoyed the idea. It did feel a bit repetitive in the middle, and I thoroughly enjoyed the ending. I was very happy once I picked it up, and I did manage to read it very quickly. It was a very easy to read book and a very successful book in my opinion, so 4 stars. I also read Father Brown, or The Innocence of Father Brown, so the first collection of short stories. This was interesting, I gotta say. This is by G.K. Chesterton, and so the first story, which is, let's see, the Blue Cross. Yeah, the Blue Cross. So the Blue Cross was a very interesting introduction to Father Brown. I really liked how it introduced him as being this really conniving, but really kind father, where it was like, oh, let me make a stir everywhere we go so people know that the fathers or like the priests or whatever are walking this way. So I really liked that. And then literally every other short story, I was like, these are really graphic. And there was a lot of beheading and a lot of like brains and a lot of skulls. And I was like, when was this taking place? Because beheadings and skulls, and it was just like a lot. So I was kind of shocked at how grotesque it was in a lot of ways. So, I mean, I did not feel grossed out, but at the same time when I was reading it, I was like, wow. The first story did not feel that way, but all of the other short stories were very grotesque. So I was kind of shocked at how grotesque this was, but I am excited to continue on. They were very quick to read, very fast and easy. I gave the whole collection a 4 star. Like the first book of collections, I should say. I would not give the whole, like each individual one 4 stars, but I feel like as each story built on the character of Father Brown, I gave them as a collection 4 stars, because it does introduce you to more and more of Father Brown's character, which I did enjoy. So each story was its own mystery. I liked how some of the characters were repeated throughout each short story, some of the police or some of the different criminals. I did enjoy that aspect. I like seeing more and more Father Brown's perspective on justice and repentance or confession, as he liked to do that, and I thought that was interesting. So I am intrigued to read more of Father Brown, and I did enjoy it, but like I said, it was a lot more grotesque and a lot more gory, I should say, than what I expected from the first story, and also from the cover. Like, this does not look like a gory book, but it kind of was, so not what I expected. I also read an Agatha Christie so far this month, which was By the Pricking of My Thumbs. This one is a Tommy and Tuppence. It's the 4th one in the series, and I read this one specifically because I wanted to promote one in my Buzzwordathon recommendations. That's going to be coming up very shortly, this will be the recommendation in that video. Don't worry, you'll get a sneak peek of that. But this one I really enjoyed. It was kind of eerie, and it was, I don't know how to describe this one, to be honest. So Tommy and Tuppence in this one, I think, are about 60, like about 65. This one follows them as Tommy's aunt is in a home and she is getting a visit from them when Tommy visits her, and Tuppence does not go into the room because Tommy's aunt does not want her there. So Tuppence goes and talks to a lady out there, out in the hall essentially, or dining room area. And they are having interesting discussions, both of them in the area. And then 3 weeks later, Tommy's aunt dies and they get a painting which kind of spurs them on to an investigation. Tuppence in particular is inspired by this painting. It looks very familiar to her, so she starts to investigate where this painting is, why it looks familiar, and then also she's concerned to why the home is missing the lady that she talked to before, like why that lady is suddenly gone. And then there's another suspicious death. Like, things are looking strange and it's very suspicious. I don't really know how much more I can say. It just was kind of on that trail. It was a very suspicious book. And it was very interesting. I really enjoyed it all. I would highly recommend not reading the back of this book because it kind of spoiled a little bit, but I really enjoyed this one. It was a very good Tommy Tuppence. I gave it 4 stars and I thoroughly enjoyed this one. If you are doing the Read Christie 2022 project, I think this one would be fantastic for a female adventurer, as Tuppence herself goes on quite the adventure without Tommy, and it is very fascinating. She does a lot of adventuring all by herself, and that will work perfectly for that prompt if you do pick it up. I think that one is March, but I might be completely wrong. So either way, this one will work perfectly for the female adventurer month. I also picked up a couple children's books. One of them was one that I had purchased a long time ago, or not a long time ago, but a few months ago, which is Noah the Narwhal, A Tale of Ups and Downs. This one's by Judith Klausner and illustrated by Sarah Gould, or Gould. I don't know. But this one is about a narwhal with chronic illness that's invisible. I really loved this one. I read it really quick and it was fantastic. So it just is about 5 days in a row where Noah the Narwhal wakes up with a day of pain. And I loved how the different people in his life respond to him in a bad way. And then they realize that, you know what, life is better with him there. So that's one that's describing the pain in his head. So I really loved this one, giving it 5 stars. I wish that this book was in print still. It's not in print, so I had to spend a lot of money on it, actually, like $25 American, which is a lot. But it was just fantastic, and I'm so glad I own it now. And I also read Julia Child, like Julia, Child, by Ko Maclear, and illustrated by Julie Morstad. This one is a fictional book. I read it mostly because of the kitchen prompt on my clue board, which I was like, I just want a Julia Child book. And this book popped up. I think this might be kind of a cheat, but either way I read it, so I'm counting it. And it is a fictional book about Julia Child and making books, or not making books, but making food to keep people living life, and with the childlike, I don't know, inspirations. So keeping people feeling with like childlike wonder. The illustrations in here look like this. It was okay. It was 3 stars. Not the greatest children's book I've ever read, but it wasn't bad either. I don't know if I'd bring it to work with me because there are some better books I would probably bring, but it wasn't a bad book. So there's that. I also read Madame Deffand and the Idiots by Javier Marias. This one was a collection of 5 nonfiction memoirs, essentially, of people from real life. So in this we had Madame Deffand and the Idiots, and then we also had Oscar Wilde after prison, Emily Bronte. It's called Emily Bronte, the Silent Major, Joja Barnes in Silence, and Nabraniak in Raptures. So I found these kind of interesting. I don't remember what exactly I'll give it. I'll check. So overall, I gave this one a 3 star. I think it was interesting for a lot of different reasons. So Emily Bronte, I found kind of interesting, as I had read I've read the Bronte's mother's biography, but I haven't read anything else about them nonfiction wise. So I found that to be interesting. And I found the one about, Nebovic. I don't know how to pronounce his name, but he wrote Lolita. And so I found that one kind of interesting, but also like, that's weird because I don't really feel interested in reading Lolita because I know the context of the book. And then I found some of the other ones kind of fascinating, but it's really short. So I was like, they're just kind of too short for anything to be gleaned from it, in my opinion. So I would have wanted something longer. And that's just kind of my complaint with anything that's too short. It's not long enough in that regard. So also because of how small the pages are, it's already so short in page count. It's not really long enough in that regard. So my official Buzzwordathon book was When Chronic Pain and Illness Takes Everything Away, How to Mourn Our Losses. And this is by Esther Smith. This book is about chronic pain and the Christian life. And it was short. It's about, how long? 55 pages. And I almost cried during it. I shouldn't have read it where I did. I was reading it, when I was in public, and it was just, I teared up. It was just so heartwarming and gut-wrenching and so real. It talks about the things that you lose when you have chronic pain, like dreams and, you know, the future and potential, but also it talks about things like, you know, you lose the future, but you also lose right now. Like, you lose what can be today, and you lose the ability to do things right away. You also lose friendships, and you lose, you know, potential with them, and you lose different things. And it was talking a lot about grief and how to grieve different relationships and different things, and how you really do need to grieve what chronic illness and chronic pain takes away from you, because if you don't, then you are always having that grief with you, and you have to grieve that loss. And it just was so powerful and so good. And I felt so impacted by the book, and it was just such a short novella, essentially nonfiction, but it was just so good. And if you have any chronic pain and you want to know anything about that, I would highly recommend checking out, this one. It was just like a gut punch and then the Band-Aid that like soothed it all. Like, it was just so wonderful, because it was just like everything that you hate, but at the same time, it was like, it was all there. I don't know how to explain it. It's wonderful. And Esther Smith is someone who has chronic illness herself, so it's an Own Voices look at the world. And she's just so honest, because she talked about, you know, how when she had a flare up and it lasts so long, and she's on the floor crying, and it's like, she doesn't have to be that honest with us, but she is. And it's just like, that's so authentic that you can't help but feel her authenticity coming through the pages. So I thoroughly loved it. Perfection, 5 out of 5 stars. It's like 10 out of 5 stars. And I can't wait to read her other nonfiction book, which I can't remember the title of right now, but I am desperate to read that soon, because it's just going to be heartwarming, I'm sure. I also read Much Ado About a Latte by Kathleen Fuller. I got an arc of this one, but I finished it just a bit after the arc or the book was published. And this one was really interesting because first of all, I really loved the setup. I loved how it was set in a diner. And Tanner is the chef or the cook, and he is working there for about 3 years, and she's been working there for a longer time, like 7 years. But they were like high school friends, and at the very beginning, the first chapter, they're forced to kiss in a high school party. So there's this awkward tension, and he just loved Tanner for a very long time. So I really enjoyed this setup, and I liked how it was kind of this dynamic. But of course, there's other tensions. I also didn't like how the summary kind of went at it, or the cover looks, because I think that's deceptive. I liked how the story progressed with them having this awkward tension between them while Anita is trying to find space to grow herself, move on from just being a waitress in a diner, but also she's finding contentment with her life, as she is happy doing that job, but she also wants to find content with more. And Tanner also wants to do more, but he's also supporting his mother and his little brother who's at college, but he's also needing to realize that, you know, they can stand on their own 2 feet and he doesn't have to be always taking care of them. I really did enjoy all of those elements. I loved how they had this awkward relationship at the same time. They were like friends but not, and I really enjoyed how it was written. I cannot wait to read book 1 because it is book 2 in a series. They're written more like standalones, but obviously I think with romances you can read them in out of order because you know they're going to be together in the end. And then book 3 is coming out I think this summer. I already have it on hold at my library, so I'll be reading that whenever it comes out, unless I get an ARC of it as well, because I would love to read an advanced copy of that since I know I enjoyed book 2. So I think it'll be a really wonderful thing to read. And I highly recommend checking out Much Ado About a Latte. It was lots of fun. I also read It's Not What It Looks Like by Molly Burke. This one is obviously written by Molly Burke, but it's also narrated as she is blind. And this is mostly, I think, only in audio form. She had in the audiobook a PDF form that you could read as well. So I think that was really a great option, but I listened to it because it's her version. I think it is really interesting because I mean, I've been watching her videos, so I know how she talks about disability and how it impacts her life, but I found it really interesting to hear about her experience growing up disabled and how she learned in a classroom with disability and how it affected her with all of the friends around her, with the teachers who didn't understand, also with the other schools that she went to, how she got her first guide dog, different things that were so impactful in her life, and also then how she moved forward into getting a job and different things like that. It was very interesting. It was only a 3-hour audiobook or 3.5-hour audiobook, but it was very, very important. And I think it's also very enlightening because she's very honest about things, even like when it comes to service dogs, like how do you treat a service dog? And she's not saying it in a way to shame anyone. It's more in the way of, if you don't know, here's what you should know. And so I felt like it was really, really informative, but also very powerful and very touching because she's just so raw and honest. It does talk a lot about mental health and how she has struggled with that in her younger years, but also how it has impacted her lately. And then also talks about how she, you know, struggles with relationships and all those different things because of her physical disability. So I think it was really, really interesting, and I highly recommend checking it out if you are all interested in disabilities and how, you know, that can impact the world. I've also read A Big Day for Baseball by Mary Pope Osbourne. This is the 29th book in the Magic Trio series. I listened to this one. It's about an hour-long audiobook, and it's about the day that Jackie Robinson stepped up to the plate for the very first baseball game, where he was the very first African-American to be at a major leagues game. It was very, very good. I really enjoyed it. I had never listened to that story before or read it, and I really, really liked it. It was very, very impactful. I was thoroughly impressed with the way it was handled and the way that the discussion was talked about. I definitely feel like these more, like, not like the older ones are bad, because I feel like the older ones are still really well done, and like especially the cultural ways, I feel like they have always been really well handled, especially reading them now. But this one has been written in a very recent time, and this one I felt like was very appropriately handled. And I'm excited to continue on with the very new released ones, because they are still being released, which I think is very exciting. So I am very happy to keep going with the new released ones, and very excited to read on with number 30 as soon as I can get it. The last book that I have read so far this month, I'm sorry this has been so long, was All the Quiet Places by Brian Thomas Isaac, sorry. This one is a debut novel by Brian Thomas Isaac, and he's, I think, about 70 years old. He grew up in the Okanagan tribe, and he grew up in the 70s. So it's very much an own voices book. So All the Quiet Places is about a boy named Eddie who is about 5 years old in 55, so very much like the same age as the author. And he is going through his life essentially in the book until he's about 18 years old. So we're going through his childhood through like late teens. And it's following him as he is traveling with his mother and his young brother as they are going through very difficult times. It is about him on the First Nations Reserve, as well as they are traveling with family friends and his grandmother and meeting up with his father. It is very, I don't know how to describe it in a way, because I'm like at a loss for words. It was very poignant, very poignant. It was very tense and dramatic, and not dramatic in a bad way, because I feel like sometimes you can say that word and it can sound really bad, but it was dramatic in a great way. Something else I found really impactful about the book was cultural trauma, and not only that, but like generational trauma. It talked a lot about that with Eddie and his father and passing it down. So Eddie himself did not go to residential school, but it talked a lot about other children going to residential school, and then also how fathers and mothers can treat their children, who then can treat their children. So it was a lot about generational trauma and cultural trauma, but then also how the reserves didn't have enough of whatever it was, food or electricity or anything like that. So getting the appropriate items or appropriate needs into those areas. So it was a very appropriate book for the time era. It felt very accurate, and I felt like it was reading almost not maybe a biography, but it was like clearly Brian Thomas Isaac knew what he was writing about because he lived it, but also he was very, very clever with the way he wrote it, with the different characters that he used and how he wrote them all in a very specific way. There was not a huge cast of characters, so it was very easy to follow who was who, but at the same time, you really got attached to them. And when the ending hit, I was like, what in the world just happened? And I don't know what else to say. It was just so powerful. So yeah, I definitely think it is well worth the read, and I highly recommend checking out All the Quiet Places. This was actually my book for Chantel's Read Your Bookshelf Challenge, so it has quiet in the title. That was really helpful for me. My hold came in, but I was very happy to have read it anyways, and I am glad to have added that to my reading this month. So those are the 14 books that I've read so far this month. I have been a reading machine, and I have been very happy with all of that. Although I've read 14 books, there's only like 21,000 pages I've read, which I know only that's still a lot, but at the same time for 14 books, that's not a very huge amount. So I am going to be focusing mostly on arcs for the rest of the month, I think, and my Vanity Fair and Alias Grace, because I do really want to focus on Alias Grace. I want to give it a good solid shot, even though I haven't taken it off my bookshelf yet because it's still there. So I do really want to give it a shot. But I have finished all my TBR Clue books, so that is good for me, and I don't have to worry about any of those anymore. So there's that, and I am very happy with all of my reading so far this month. So please let me know down below in the comments what you've been reading so far this month, if you've read any of the books I've talked about and what your thoughts are on them, or if you'll be checking them out soon. I have not been having a great health month so far, so I've been able to read but not do much else. So I'm not being able to respond to comments, which is terrible, but I have been reading comments and I really appreciate them all. So even though I'm not responding, I do really appreciate every comment that you leave. So thank you so much. But I will respond to them as soon as I'm able. Thank you so much for watching. If you are new here, please like and subscribe. And if you're not new here, I would really appreciate the like anyways. I will hopefully have another video out for you on Thursday, but if I'm not capable, I will have one out for you on Sunday. So once a week while I'm not feeling well enough is my goal. And I am happy with that for now. So anyways, I will chat to you next time. Bye for now.